This episode of the Prestige TV podcast is brought to you by Coffee Mate.
Coffee Mate has been searching the globe for flavors that pair perfectly with coffee.
So when they heard that the new season of HBO's The White Lotus was set in Thailand, they were inspired to brew up 2 new flavors, Thai iced coffee and pina colada flavored creamers.
They're available for a short time only. So for the love of coffee, go try them now.
Hello, welcome back to the Prestige TV podcast feed. I'm Joanna Robinson.
I'm Rob Mahoney.
We're here to talk about White Lotus, Season 3, Episode 3, The Meaning of Dreams. Rob, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. I don't have any dreams of note to mark down as far as to parse their meaning. Do you have any dreams you want to pick apart today?
Gosh, no. We've already been through Rob Mahoney Anxiety Dream Corner on a different pod. That's true. We've already talked about that. Do I have a recurring anxiety dream?
Well, let me ask you this. Saxon brings up, the very primal idea of having nightmares about fire and snakes. I can't say I've ever had a nightmare about fire and snakes. Are you a snake dreamer?
No, I'm not a snake dreamer, but what a fun thing that would to be. No, I can't remember my dreams, and I think that's a blessing. I think mostly my dreams are like awkward, socially anxious interactions. I think those are my usual nightmares. Nothing primal or elemental or anything like that. Do you know?
Exactly. Yeah, you're approaching people you think may have murdered a woman you met several years ago, and they give you a blank stare while in response. That's the kind of nightmare you have.
But do you think Belinda knows that you're talking about Belinda and our guy, Greg Gary?
Of course.
Not my guy, your guy, but like,
not my guy, nobody's guy.
Do you think Chloe's guy, Greg Gary, do you think Belinda knows about what happened to Tanya?
Well, clearly not, or else she would be having a more outsized response.
Yeah. I feel like if let me say this. If I'm Belinda and I know what happened to Tanya, I am not approaching Greg Gary.
No.
That's not happening.
Stay far, far away. The last thing you would want is to be on his radar at that point.
Absolutely. Shout out to a couple of our listeners who wrote in to let us know that, we talked about the voice cameo in episode 2. The voice cameo in this episode as the Ratliff lawyer is the podcaster Scott Galloway.
Yeah.
And he has a really charming anecdote on his own podcast about how Jason Isaacs came over to his house to give him acting lessons, and he didn't know that it was Jason Isaacs or who Jason Isaacs was. He was just like, this handsome man came to his house to give him acting lessons, and then he found out it was Lucius Malfoy. But anyway, he got cast because the producers were a fan of him, a fan of his voice. Then he took some swings at this, and they're like, oh no, podcasters are not the same as actors. And then they got him the Jason Isaacs acting boot camp package. So
I mean, it seems quite lush. Imagine not knowing who Jason Isaacs is if he shows up at your front door. That's a tough beat, but a good acting coach to have.
Scott's been busy knowing about a lot of other things.
We are available, by the way, for voice cameos. If you need like a 911 dispatcher, a concerned lawyer, a panicking coworker as the office is being raided by the FBI, like for all of your projects. I think, I don't want to speak for you, Joe, but I think we would be interested. We would take the meeting.
Do you have a theater kid background?
No, of course not.
Yeah,
absolutely not.
But you are good at basketball and I am not.
We all have our talents,
and you are not. Okay. We already talked about the dreams. This is the name of the episode. We open with Victoria Ratliff's dream. I want to talk to you about this concept of the collective unconscious, which is what Piper and Vicky are talking about when they're talking about the dreams, or mostly Piper is talking about. Any thoughts or feelings on the collective?
just broadly speaking?
Yeah.
Pro if it exists, ambiguous to me if it does. But I'm open to the possibility.
This is like a Carl Jung joint, a Jungian idea. And
I have to say, Jung really went off with this one. Really knew what he was doing.
He showed out, and he showed up.
Yep.
And I love that for him. This idea of the collective unconscious is common to all human beings. He believed the collective unconscious is responsible for a number of deep-seated beliefs and instincts, such as spirituality, sexual behavior, and life and death. So it's more about the nature but this versus nurture, but this idea that your nature is somehow passed down through the generations. It's sort of imprinted on you. And I think that's really interesting to think about, especially in terms of what we talked about last week, in terms of the roles or the identities or the positions that these people find themselves in, and can they break out of them or can they not? Can Piper be different from her family, or is she doomed to just be Ratliffian like the rest of her life? What about these lessons that Vicky has to impart on them about what does or does not designate a trashy rich person?
Yes, yeah.
You know, like these are all, you know, important questions. Can you correct your posture to break out of your people pleaser status? Like all of this idea is really rich inside of the Mike White universe.
Well, there's so much posturing happening, especially among people of this kind of class. And I think you're right to point out Victoria's statement about trashy rich people versus non-trashy rich people, because not only in the collective unconscious sense is there this like generational passing of humanity and understanding and shared experience, there's also like a pervasive, broad humanity that we are all tapping into together collectively. And so this idea that we are drawing these very strict defining lines between us, that, you know, Tim Ratliff couldn't possibly be the kind of person who takes drugs. He couldn't possibly be the kind of person who takes a nap, because who would do such a thing? And yet, it's just, and yet it's just very important to so many of these people that they appear in the world in a very particular way. And that's, I would think, what gets in the way of your ability to tap into the collective unconscious if it's out there.
I do want to just, we don't have like a ton of emails to get to this week, but I do want to skip to this one that you just mentioned, Tim, taking a Lorazepam. Lorazepam Tim, maybe my new favorite TV character of all time. I'm a big fan.
Yeah.
I can't wait to see where we go. I want to talk to you about his showering habits in a second, but Jackie, our listener Jackie, wrote in, call me crazy, but Tim Ratliff dry swallowing a pill is way more unhinged than Rick releasing a bunch of venomous snakes. I am an Australian though, so maybe a matter of perspective. Dry swallowing a pill, would you do it, Rob Mahoney?
Would do, have done, not my preference, but I think it depends on the size of the pill.
There's something just really uncomfortable to me watching Tim just sort of like snap his head back as he dry swallowed the pill. I don't know, just like,
for me it was much more him putting the pill on a hotel couch cushion and then putting it directly in his mouth. That was what stuck out to me about that sequence.
Yeah. Tim Ratliff is making great use of the outdoor shower at the villa.
But it's not a good sign if you're taking slow motion showers as far as your overall state of mind.
I really agree. How do you feel about an outdoor shower, Rob Mahoney?
I mean, only as an application post pool or post ocean. As like a general daily practice, I don't really see it for myself.
Feels too vulnerable to you, do you think?
Yeah, I'm open to some windows, but I want a closed environment.
Okay. I really want to talk about Piper Ratliff, actually, sort of more than anyone else. But what do you want to say about the Ratliffs? And I'll get to my Piper takes.
I mean, starting with Tim, I agree with you. Lorazepam Tim is a wonderful television invention. I enjoyed watching him go from basically like fully clenched, mentally shredding his own brain with anxiety into absolutely blissed out slash napped out. That was just a great transition point for the show, and I can't wait to see where it goes. I'm a little worried we're getting into like leaving Las Vegas territory with Tim, where it's like he's seeing the end of the line. He's starting to make some pretty dramatic moves. He wants the phones in the bag. Wants to be he didn't want to be cut off from the outside world, but he certainly wanted everyone else to, now that his little white collar secret has escaped containment, right? It's no longer him gathering information. It's people calling in. There's agents at the office. What the fuck is happening? Everyone is panicking. Everyone is freaking out. And I will say the most tragic offshoot of that to me is him taking Saxon aside, and Saxon finally getting his sweet moment of daddy affirmation. Yeah. And it is basically all so that he will shut up and put his phone in the bag. It's a really tough look and a really tough moment for admittedly a contemptible character, but one who only wants one thing, and it's daddy's approval.
Well, no, he wants to.
Okay, sorry. He wants a couple things. He wants a couple things. I want to step back.
But he does want the big dogs to respect him.
He does.
That's, no one's a bigger dog in his mind than his dad.
He's the biggest dog.
He is. Tim, the unraveling that we're seeing here is sort of something I was really hoping for, because I was just talking to our pal Van Lathan about he's been speed binging White Lotus season 1 and season 2 because he's obsessed with season 3 and is like, I can't watch anymore season 3, I'm out. And I was like, go back and watch the previous seasons. And so he has in the last, like, I don't know, 48 hours or something. But he was talking to me yesterday about the great unraveling. He was like having a slow hang with season 2, and then he was like, he called it like the great unraveling. And I think that is something that is, we know, is so key to every season of White Lotus. This is just like watching Armand unravel, or watching, you know, whoever it might be, Aubrey Plaza's character in season 2, if you want to call that an unraveling, and I do. And so this eyeballing Tim from the start as the person who would be the funniest to watch unravel, and getting that so quickly in the season, I think it's only up from here, honestly, with Lorazepam Tim.
A lot of promising possibilities. I just don't think we're gonna get the tsunami, Joe. We're gonna get the tsunami of the soul, right? We're gonna get Tim Ratliff being the man standing in front of the wave at the end of the day. I think is what might happen.
Metaphorically,
of course, metaphorically speaking. But one of our listeners, Bree, emailed in with an interesting thought that I had not considered, which is, what if what exposed Tim Ratliff's crimes in the first place was something like Saxon's incompetence at work, right? What if Saxon, our guy who is very Vincent Adultman in his the way he talks about his job, like, I love work so much, I love job, I love being this guy, doesn't seem to know what he is doing for a living. I would imagine is not very good at it. Would not surprise me one bit if an email sent to the wrong place by Saxon ended up resulting in this kind of investigation, or it ended up kind of moving some of the wheels in motion as far as how Tim ultimately got here.
Yeah, I mean, that feels like the least of Saxon's potential crimes in this show, but I think it's definitely on the table for sure. Also on the Lorazepam front, one of our listeners, Chris, wrote in, you know, because Vicky says they're not addictive, I just take them when I need them.
This is not true.
This is
not true.
Deeply untrue about Lorazepam, which is not, Chris wanted to let us know, is not a sleeping pill, even though Tim is using them to get his nap reps in. This is an anti-anxiety medication, and this is sort of like a quick acting, sort of brief window. Are you afraid of flying? Take this Lorazepam as you, like, you know, as you're taking off, and you will make it through the flight.
Yeah.
Which is perhaps why Tim is like housing them, because the window is small. So how many pills does Victoria have left in her bottle? I have questions about that.
And what's going to happen to her when she runs out, right? Once Tim has consumed, once he's popped every pill there is to pop, I worry about Victoria at this point.
Yeah, that'll be so interesting, because, like, it's one thing to watch Lorazepam Tim become more and more unhinged.
Sober Victoria. I can't even imagine her.
No, who is she? I can't wait to find out. All right, so let's talk about Piper. And one of our listeners, Laura, pointed this out, and I think it's really worth ruminating on, this idea of the Piper archetype that we've gotten a version of each season on this show. And she points out, like, Paula, who's Sydney Sweeney's friend in the first season. And she mentioned Harper, Aubrey Plaza's character in the second season. This person who's almost like a stand-in for the audience, who sort of like sees the hypocrisy, sees the shitty behavior, calls it out. You know, Piper has that great line about what the White Lotus actually is, and, you know, right then the blonde blob come in, the fancies come in their Lululemon yoga. Like, you know, Piper's got a keen eye on everything. But what usually happens in a season of White Lotus to those characters is that Mike White shows them, like, exposes them as sort of as fallible, as vulnerable to the temptations of the White Lotus experience, or to shitty behavior, or anything like that. So,
which I would say is a critical part of why the show works the way it does. Like, you can't just have the preachy person off to the side commenting on everyone. Like, it's so much more interesting when those characters themselves can be co-opted, are susceptible to why everyone is here in the first place.
Yeah, and I don't feel like Mike White's treatment of them is that he's, like, punishing them for their behavior, but just showing that we all are in a very similar luxury yacht, if you want to look forward to next week's episode. So, like, what do you see coming for Piper, who we got a little bit more information on when she went to go visit the monastery this week.
That was such an interesting sequence for her because she goes, she is greeted by this very friendly monk with a MacBook, a monk book. She makes her appointment, and then just breezes on out. And like what my understanding from her from both of these sequences, when she first goes to visit the temple and when she returns here, and is like seems pretty deeply incurious, honestly, for somebody who wants to be potentially spending a year here in a program, furthering her education, deepening her spirituality. Like she makes her appointment and then she doesn't even bother to look around, to talk to anyone else, to even kind of like take in the scene. It's like, oh, job done. I'm up out of here.
It's also it's very surface. Like, so this idea, it seems to be that Piper wants to do a program, however long she's going to stay there. We don't know, but this is not what she has pitched to her parents as to why she's there. So she wants to do a program where presumably she stays at the monastery for some period of time. And if it were me, I would want to see, where are we sleeping at the monastery?
Reasonable.
What's their daily schedule like? What is all of that? And it is very, yes, I think, white girl privilege to be like, I'm going to go to a monastery in Thailand and everything is going to be better. And I'm going to be so enlightened. And I don't know anything about the practicalities of what this actually is. That sounds absolutely correct to me. So
she even kind of shoots a little glance to the tourists who are there. In a way that's like a tiny little throwaway moment, but to me is very aloof and like, aha, like I am of this environment. Like I will soon be a member of this place, and you are but a mere visitor, despite the fact that I actually know nothing about what it means to be here and live here or practice this faith at all.
Exciting times for Piper Ratliff. I'm sure everything will go perfectly well for her.
Sure.
Saxon mentions that they are invited on Greg Gary's boat. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a second, for this, what he calls this full moon big holiday, which is a huge holiday in Thailand. Every full moon they celebrate with this like massive beach party in the island that's one over from where the White Lotus is being filmed. And the description that I found was more than 12 powerful sound systems turn the 800-meter beach into possibly the most popular open-air nightclub in the world once a month. Once a month is like a heavy investment for like, we're putting on the world's biggest beach rave, but we're doing it every month. Any hopes or dreams for the full moon party? I mean, how can you, if you're Mike White and you're like, we're going to set a season in Thailand, and once a month they have the world's biggest beach rave on this island, how do you... especially since, as we've heard over and over again, that Mike White, the season came to Mike White in like a fever drug dream when he was in the hospital.
Right.
So how can you not say like, let's go to a Thai beach rave? Is this something you're excited for in a future episode of White Lotus?
Without a doubt. I mean, I'm excited for the yacht trip over there and all of the exciting possibilities, especially as it seems like our groups are going to be intermingling a little bit in some potentially surprising ways. And we already get the developing love, maybe strong, lust triangle between Greg Gary, Chloe, and Saxon, who have now been officially formally introduced and maybe raising some eyebrows at each other over one of them being a douche. Look, who am I to judge if someone has a type? They're into what they're into. But all of these people are going to be in one space with potentially as many Ratliffs as want to come. I think Rick is assumingly going to be off in Bangkok, which is unfortunate because I would love to see him get after it at the rave. I think the raving characters I am most excited about are those you would not anticipate ever ending up at a rave. So Victoria at a rave, let's fucking go, right? Like honestly, Gary at a rave. I want to see what this guy is up to.
Piper at a rave. Chelsea at a rave, I feel like I know exactly what that's like, and I love that for her.
She was born at a rave.
Life's a rave for Chelsea. Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, to wrap up the Ratliffs as well as we can inside of their isolated storyline, Tim Ratliff. Let's go back to Lorazepam Tim.
Yep.
We mentioned last week that we'd gotten several emails about this concept of like family annihilator, which you and I both were like, ooh,
it did seem slightly more plausible this week.
Does it?
A little bit. I still don't think White Lotus is that kind of show. And like, it's honestly, Mike White has seemed over the years so conflicted about the murder part of White Lotus that the idea of wiping out like half the cast in a mass murder doesn't seem like what he is interested in. But I am willing and able to be surprised, clearly.
What about the idea of lorazepam Tim as the body in the water that Zion found? Whether or not that body in the water is dead, we actually don't know.
It's true.
Certainly floating as if dead, but not confirmed dead necessarily. No. So could that be lorazepam Tim having like taken a stumble from the outdoor shower into the outdoor pond? And
oh my God, I didn't even think about the outdoor shower, the falling risks of the outdoor shower while hopped up on lorazepam.
Yeah,
it's a great theory. I think there's a very reasonable chance of that.
Who is he? Is Tim top of your list? Who's top of your list for like
who the body is?
Yeah.
I think based on this week, I'm gonna say yes.
All right, Tim, I'm not rooting for you because you seem like you've done some shitty things, and in general, I don't root for rich people who have embezzled money. But you know, life is long.
You didn't vote for Trump, though, did you?
Are we really going to talk about Trump tonight?
Let's talk about the fancies, the blonde blonde.
Let's,
shall we? Okay, I wanted to ask you how you feel. I can't remember if Mal, Bill, and I got into like the specifics of this. We talked about this a little bit, but like, I'm really curious about Mike White's decision to like put Trump into this season, because of course last season we got the voter versus non-voter conversation in the two couples, and that was very like sort of like Trump not Trump coded
for sure
in a way. But to put Trump's name in there again, making this season not knowing how the election was going to pan out. How do you feel about that as a choice?
Feels like it aligns with the show. I mean, this is a show that talks about privilege, that talks about class. Like, if you thought you were tuning into White Lotus to get away from the political sphere, I don't know what show you've been watching. And you are sadly mistaken, unfortunately. Like, this is a show that deals with the economic realities of these people and what they care about and don't care about, what they value and don't value. Putting the name Trump in there, to me, is just an extension of that. In this case, like a very sharp dividing wedge between these three women, one of whom is, you know, she's not a Republican, Joe. She is an independent. Let's be very honest about everything that's happening here.
Do we really want to talk about Trump tonight, though? Okay.
The Rob, bless your heart magic that plays across Kate's face.
Yeah.
Unbelievable acting from Bibb here.
Eyes full squint.
Oh my gosh, you know, it's so good.
Smile, no teeth. Very good stuff from Leslie Bibb. Rob, as a Texan, how do you feel about Texas being invoked in this particular way?
Fair. That said, Kate has said that she's from Austin.
I know.
I think this is what someone would say if they are from the area more broadly. I'm going to guess it's more Lakeway, Bee Cave. Like that's the kind of vibe that I'm getting from Kate's overall deal, which, as we can infer, is like country club husband, like corporate high life. You know, she's living a kind of privileged existence that is not demographically Austin, but is certainly adjacent to Austin. Like, there's a lot of very white, very affluent, very conservative parts around the city proper.
You know, I have spent I go to Austin a couple times every year. I've never lived in Austin. I'm a mere visitor, so I'm not like trying to make any broads. Well, maybe I am, but anyway.
Joe, go off. Say what you gotta say.
I love Austin. I will say I have had the most shocking things that have ever been said to me by a Lyft driver have been said to me by a Lyft driver in Austin. So
can you expand, please?
Just racial stuff, and I think I look like I might be receptive to someone saying things that I am not receptive to. So
how does that make you feel, that that's the energy that you put out into the world? Feels
great. It's like how people would never offer me drugs because they think I look like a narc. You know, it's just my life. Something that the official podcast brought up that I thought was really interesting is the way that they transitioned inside of this conversation from talking about religion to talking about Trumpism.
Yes.
And this idea of Trumpism as a kind of religion, a kind of belief system, in a way that previous political movements in America have not quite felt as, cult-like is one way to describe it, or however you want to describe it. But like, this idea of like the figure that we follow sort of idea of Trumpism. And another thing that I thought was really interesting that Gia Tolentino brought up on the official podcast is this idea of like when we first meet the blonde blob as they are described by Mike White, Lori says it's like looking in a mirror, which is, of course, is something that like Jacqueline doesn't love to hear from Lori, by the way. But like how Mike White really wanted to make it seem like these women are not that different. And in so many ways, they aren't that different. Even though we've dialed in on certain things that they either share or don't share. We've got two women who are moms versus a woman who is not a mom, or we've got two women who have invested a lot of time and money in like plastic surgery and stuff like that versus a woman who maybe hasn't. Women who have focused on the career versus not, all this sort of stuff. So like these various little differences. What's the biggest wedge you can drive? Is it Trumpism? Is it something else? But then at the end of the day, how actually similar they are and how interesting I think that is inside of this sort of Trump conversation of like, Lori and Jacqueline are like, oh no, Kate is so different from us. We did not realize how different she is. And then the question is, actually, how different is a white privileged woman who votes for Trump versus a white privileged woman who doesn't vote for Trump inside of this context? I think that's the question the show is asking.
I think it is too. I think it's so powerful in that way because you're right. These are three women who have a lot of things in common and at the same time are in quite different places, but they are paired off in all of those fascinating ways. Like I hadn't even thought about the careerist aspect and how Jacqueline and Lori might have that potentially in common. And we get to see them spend some quality time together, if at Kate's expense, for a lot of this episode.
Yeah.
But like it's cool to see all of these different ways in which it is naturally 2 versus 1 in every possible direction within this friend group. And that only works if it feels balanced, if you're going to create this dynamic. Like you could write the show around having a very clear in-group, out-group. But it's more interesting if it's sort of a revolving door and one of them is always feeling a little bit left out of whatever's happening.
I think what I have my eye on most inside of this group in terms of things I'm worried about or suspicious about is Jacqueline has had a few speeches now that seem very much like a I'm a girl's girl kind of speech, like talking about the patriarchal nature of religion or this, that, and the other thing.
A lot of masculine, feminine in this episode, like very directly called out.
Yeah. I don't trust that Jacqueline Lemon is a girl's girl at the end of the day. I do not think that is her energy at all. And I'm worried about the way in which she's pushing Valentine on Lori.
Yep.
And I'm worried about how that is all going to shake out at the end of the day.
Feels like a real swooping in situation for Jacqueline, potentially. I liked what you mentioned, Joe, on the Sunday pod about the flex of Jacqueline here. Of it's not just pushing Lori, but let me help you set this up. Let me make this happen for you. Not dissimilar from what Saxon is doing with Lockie, right? Like all hands on deck. Like I'm going to hook you up. I'm going to show you how to do this.
Yeah.
And the dynamic between the two women is a little different, but it is very much like pushing in a way that feels like projecting, in a way that feels like Jacqueline really wants to sleep with Valentine. And you can imagine a scenario where maybe Lori does get some confidence. Maybe she does end up pursuing Valentine and Jacqueline kind of interjects herself into that dynamic at a time where she may not be as welcome as she is right now.
100%.
But in all of this, Lori is feeling like a little tentative at the beginning of this episode about that very idea. She talks about how, you know what, he probably wouldn't even want it anyway, Joe. He probably wouldn't be interested in someone like me.
Girl, Carrie Coon.
Meanwhile, in real life, I don't know if you caught this last week, but Carrie Coon went on the Marin podcast and was talking about her relationship with the legend, Tracy Letts, their marriage. Yeah. There was a bit of a misunderstanding where listeners thought she had nodded in the direction of like, actually, maybe we have an open marriage. Maybe we have an open relationship. Listener, let me tell you, the internet fucking exploded. So Carrie Coon herself getting lots of interest from parties she is not even remotely interested in reciprocating. Our girl Lori is just going through it though. She doesn't seem to understand her appeal to the world.
Will you tell me, Rob, given that, tell me a little bit more about the way in which the internet exploded when they thought Carrie Coon might be on the table for them.
She had to issue a follow-up statement in which she said that her relationship, she described it as open-minded, describing their kind of more modern sensibilities across the board, not open. And of note, for our White Lotus purposes, in that statement, did the speak no, hear no, see no evil monkey emojis all lined up.
Interesting.
Is it good guerrilla marketing? Is it good monkey marketing?
Oh, nice.
Carrie
knows how to play social media, I gotta say.
It's true.
I love her. Walton Goggins. I already said on the pod with Bill and Mal how excited I was for Richter Goggins to enter the chat here. Tell me how you felt for Rick to step out of the doom and gloom into the con man persona that we are so used to seeing Walton Goggins. What did that do for you personally, Rob Mahoney?
It brought an incredible light to my life to see Goggins in charmer mode again. And this is relatively muted by Goggins standards. Right. I'm actually starting to believe the Rick has a perpetual migraine commentary and that it's maybe not just an excuse to get out of these conversations, because he always seems very burdened by something, very burdened by clearly his upbringing. I'm sure some level of constant anxiety. Like, my guy needs to smoke so fucking bad in this episode that he has to go on a whole ass odyssey to get some weed.
Yeah.
So I understand where he's coming from, but he can turn it on when he needs to turn it on. And it's certainly enough to kind of start putting his plan in motion here with Sritala as far as how do we get to Bangkok? How do we... Sritala. Sorry. Tough scenes for Fabian in this episode as well. You think you know somebody. You think you know how to pronounce their name. Turns
really
out
tough.
You've been mistaken for a very long time. But yeah, Rick is getting where he needs to go, ultimately. And as far as Chelsea's part of that, I will say probably knows more than she's letting on and is more aware of what is happening and is I think just kind of like letting everything roll off her back and allowing the universe to play out as it does. But she seems too perceptive to be oblivious to the fact that Rick is weird and shady and is like doing all these random little jobs all the time.
On a con.
He's doing something.
Walton Goggins and Amy Lee Wood have been doing a lot of interviews around this episode. This seems to be the HBO's this is a Rick and Chelsea episode. I guess because they go to the snake show, etc. And they've been talking a lot about sort of the background of Rick and Chelsea. Goggins has said that they've been together for 3 years. Amy Lou has said she genuinely believes they're actually soulmates. And that there is this idea that their relationship has not always been this, that this is a very different phase of Rick's life.
Yeah. That
he is having, I think the way that Goggins put it was a midlife crisis. And, so the idea that Chelsea's come on, what are you doing? Snap out of it. Let's have fun. Is not just her sort of beating her head against a wall, that there is a version of Rick that she has traveled with before that has been very different from the Rick that she's experiencing at the White Lotus here. And so I like knowing that, because I'm just girl, what are we doing here? But if this is an unusual moment in the life of a partner who has been matching her energy, if not quite exactly her level of energy,
right. Who could? There are nuclear power plants that cannot produce that much energy.
Yeah.
But look, there's plenty in this for her, right? She gets to be at this nice resort. She gets to experience this kind of life and enjoy all the privileges of it. It is interesting to hear that, though, that maybe at one point in time they had an arrangement and now it seems like they have a relationship, right? Her using soulmate, her talking about being his life partner, right? That is maybe overstating what their relationship is from Rick's perspective, but I think is indicative of a certain level of seriousness as far as what they are to each other.
I think it's what Chelsea has always wanted from him, which is just sort of I see you, you need me. Yes. I'm going to be that for you. But something that Amy Lou Wood said on the official podcast that really kind of blew my mind. She was she keeps accusing Rick of being secretive and walled off. All this stuff is focused on Rick and what he's hiding. She's but we actually know so much about Rick and we don't know anything about Chelsea.
That's true.
She's just she has sort of successfully hidden her life behind this very bubbly, outgoing, not persona, because I do think that's actually who she is, but just sort of the way she moves through the world. She's asking other people about themselves, and she's got this insatiable curiosity, which means she doesn't ever have to talk about herself.
Right.
Which is really interesting.
Kind of a different breed of people pleaser from Lockie, right? There's like
Yeah.
the version where you try to like mediate conflict or step out of it in the way he does, and she is a de-escalator in a totally different way. Like she can bring people together, she can talk them down, she can make Rick perk up in spots here and there in a way that no one else can. Bless Chelsea and her presence on this show. It's wonderful every single time. And in very good spirits for someone who just got bitten by a fucking liberated cobra.
And then she made it to dinner.
Yeah,
I mean,
no problem.
If it were me, I would simply not be leaving the room.
Nope.
The dinner would be coming to me. Bill very, very, I think, correctly identified me as someone who seems like they should know things about astrology.
You're someone who seems like you should know things about astrology, and also someone who looks like they would be receptive to a Lyft driver's rants.
We contain multitudes, Rob Mahoney.
We truly do.
None of it's true. Do you know anything about astrology, Rob Mahoney?
I imagine I don't look like somebody who would know something about astrology.
So maybe you'll surprise us.
But sometimes our preconceptions are correct, and I in fact do not. Not my area of expertise.
What is your sign?
Cancer.
Cancer. I don't know. I'm going to say that like that means something, but I
just
have no
nod.
idea what that means.
You can just say something vague and ominous, and
Cancer.
I'll go along with it. You know, a water sign, emotional. I don't know the specifics of what it means to be a Cancer, but I'm sure our listeners can let us know. Please, we didn't mention up top, please do email us about anything going on with White Lotus, prestigetv@spotify.com, or more importantly, monkeyshootout@gmail.com.
Thanks so much for mentioning that. Speaking of emails we got and monkey shootouts, we got a couple emails about Sitala's outfit at breakfast that she's wearing.
Okay.
There's this like, it's this sort of tan button down, sort of loose fitting thing with this like black, what looks to be almost like an ink spot. Or some people said they thought it looked like a large bullet hole. Or one of our listeners, Dave, pointed out to me, rightly so, that I would know about this, and I do. In pirate culture, the black spot means you're marked for death. You receive the black spot, it means death is coming for you. So
I'm glad you could bring the pirate expertise. You know, you
no
may have missed the mark on astrology, but
no racism rants.
No,
but pirate knowledge, I do have it, and yeah. So the black spot on Sitala, would that be a satisfying death for you this season?
Potentially.
Yeah.
I think it depends on the way that she kind of weaves into the story of these other characters, right? If she is just sort of the person who owns the hotel and vaguely interacts and sometimes performs and then dies, that's not super interesting. But if strange things happen in Bangkok, if she becomes even more intertwined with the fancies, even more intertwined with Rick as in whatever game he's playing here, and Rick, as he's kind of gearing up to talk to her in the first place, there's so much like Rick Snake stuff happening in this episode overall, but he's very like predatory in terms of the way he's almost like stalking her to her table, like kind of judging the scene, waiting for his moment. And I don't know how to interpret that within the context of whether she dies or not, but certainly as far as the game he's playing, it does make sense.
That was really interesting when they were at the snake show, among other things.
First of all, would never go to a snake show.
Absolutely not.
No circumstances.
Absolutely not. But the guy running the snake show, who is like a local guy who runs snake shows.
Does he really? I mean, he's a fucking pro. Like,
he's great.
Good information, great delivery, knows his way around a cobra. Like, I would trust those guys with my life. I just don't want to go to the snake show.
Absolutely not. He mentions that the python can kill a big animal. And I think we mentioned this before, that this idea that in some of the opening credit images, we've seen sort of a smaller animal taking on a predator. I think specifically I would say in like the Amy Lou Wood Chelsea title card. So like this idea that we've had these predators, if you want to say Rick at breakfast or Saxon in the pool, or Tim Ratliff in life, or
Gary doing whatever it is he's doing.
Yeah, Jacqueline Lemon on the hunt for Valentine, whatever it is, like. But are we not paying enough attention to, the smaller threats who could take something on? Something worth thinking about. Speaking of smaller threats, time for our weekly Nice Guy Talk check-in with Rob Mahoney. Where are you?
Yeah,
on Guy Talk.
I just want to read a list of what Gaitok was up to this episode.
Okay.
Tries to parlay getting pistol whipped in the head into a bodyguard job. Okay. He gets no indication whatsoever that Sayles is interested in him being her bodyguard. No affirmation whatsoever. But that does not stop him from flagging down Mook as she's talking with her friends and walking with her friends to give her this non-update about his life. Very important to him that she knows all about it. Hollinger's bodyguards then come to him and ask him to please chill. In fact, maybe you were closer to losing your job than getting promoted to being a bodyguard.
That is not the character of that conversation.
How would you describe it?
They come to bully him. Little turkey wants to be a rooster.
I'm going to say some people,
Big guy?
Some people deserve to be bullied sometimes, Joe. This guy is...
I hate your anti-Gaitok agenda. I hate it.
He is way too big for his britches right now when all that he did was fail in his job. Like, the stance that he should maybe be fired for this, I actually think is pretty reasonable, right? Like, he had one job, and it's don't let cars zoom in and out of here, and he did both.
Well, yes. Listen, I'm not saying he deserves a promotion. I don't think he should be a Hollinger bodyguard because
You'd be very bad at it.
I think he'd be bad at it. I don't want that for him. But I just, okay. We got an email from our listener Hank, and I think it's a good perspective to have. Whether or not you're right, I actually don't know if you're gonna be right at the end of the day, and I'm gonna look like an asshole defending Gaitok. I have no idea.
This girl can't even hang out with her friends without getting cornered by this guy. And
oh my god, whatever.
No, I want to interrogate a little bit because I think a lot of people interpret Mook's reactions to Gaitok, in which she is very smiley and I think generally friendly, as her being interested in his advances. She has expressed no such interest at any point to anything he has said. It has all been a polite smile, a nod, I will see you later, a very friendly exchange. Like, she's being polite to him, and he is going way hard all the time in a way that to me spells trouble.
Okay. You might be right, and I will look like an asshole, and that's a reality that I'm willing to accept. I happen to believe that the Mook and Gaitok story is very sweet, and I think there's a way in which Mike White is actually kind of a romantic. I do agree with all these other things. Obviously, we're rooting for Chelsea and Rick to figure it out. But our listener Hank wrote in just to sort of put some. Hank, who says he's from sort of a similarly his family's from a similarly non-urban small Southeast Asian village environment. He said where everyone is locally employed service worker, content to not be a farmer or hard laborer, the still pervasive historical context of parents approving matches and stable income being quite enough for a satisfactory marriage shouldn't be discounted as just quote nice guy vibes. Whether or not Mook is looking for an exotic baddie a la season 2's Portia is separate from this context. It could simply be Mike White's own creative liberty, and I dare say personal injection, into an otherwise ho-hum but stable lifestyle, just giving a perspective as someone whose ancestral roots are part of that world. So this idea that the conversation that Mook and Gaitok had at lunch in a previous episode where he was talking about his mom and they've known each other forever,
her brothers, all that stuff.
Yeah, and it's on the one hand, from our sort of 2025 American perspective, we're is this the move? But perhaps in the environment that they live in, that is the move, so.
But he made that pitch, and I would not say she jumped at it.
I don't think she jumped at it. I just don't think she said hard no.
No,
but
they might have the look, if both of us are single in 20 years, let's figure this thing out kind of arrangement. But I don't see this going well for Gaitok.
Okay. We also saw him leave an offering of bananas at a shrine. Yeah. And I thought that was very cool. The four-headed god, which is called the Erewhon Shrine, which has nothing to do with really expensive smoothies that you can get in LA. Okay. Belinda and Portai.
Yes.
Speaking of love stories to believe in.
Hello.
How are you feeling about this?
I mean, it's lovely. Belinda had herself a day.
Yeah.
The Gary business aside, she gets a great treatment. She gets shown around the grounds. She gets to spend some quality time with Portai being held tenderly in a pool. What is the going rate for that? Or is that kind of an off menu thing?
Priceless, honestly.
I'm just saying it seems nice. I would do it. If Portai would volunteer at my expense to hold me tenderly in a pool and help me kind of levitate and float, that sounds like a lovely afternoon.
Bliss. And then he sort of has this awkward little goodbye with her. Portai has had too much, aka like one
One
drink,
beer.
too much for him. And then Belinda hears something
Yeah.
in her villa. Is that what we were meant to believe? Not sees something, right? It's she hears something.
Yeah. Could you kind of identify what you think she was reacting to? Because it's hard to tell sometimes amid an amazing score. Like I love the score of White Lotus, and we get the kind of like calls of the wild in like the monkey, like sounds of the jungle sense, and also some like calls of the wild in every other conceivable sense happening in that score. So it's
very loud moaning.
Very loud moaning happening, through yoga during some of these scenes where characters are alone and kind of steaming about each other in various ways. So I don't quite know what she's identifying. It sounds like maybe kind of like a creaking door, like a step on wood. Like I couldn't quite identify it.
I know. I kept going back through. I was like, am I supposed to see something out the window? Yeah. Is there a shadow in the, I think it's just a noise.
Yes.
And I don't know what that noise is. One has to worry that it's Gary up to no good,
or a monkey with a gun. You don't know. It could be anything.
Or a snake. Okay, how do you feel about Chekhov's toilet snake being introduced into this episode as a potential thing that could kill you?
This is a very primal fear that I have had. I have not had nightmares about this, but it's one of those things where you read that news story, or like in my case, it was on the local news or something when I was like 8 years old, and it gets wedged in your brain.
Yeah.
And then what are you to do about toilet snakes? You're defenseless.
I used to read a lot of Dave Barry columns, and he wrote one about baby alligators coming up out of the sewer.
What?
Like in Florida.
Are they coming out of gutters, or where are they coming from?
I could not tell you, and perhaps he made them up, but yes, I will say I haven't had dreams about them, but I have had thoughts about toilet gators. It might be something that is untrue, but it's something that Dave Barry wrote about that I believed in. So
how did you feel, Joe, about Rick as someone who believes very deeply in the freedom of snakes? Just a liberator at the end of the day.
I think this could not quite possibly be clearer as a metaphor for him feeling like he's in a cage and needs to break out. People have been noting this snake motif because there was first the snake choker that Chelsea was looking at in the boutique when during the smash and grab.
Which I would think we have to see again, right? It was so pointedly on camera
someone.
That it's like we will see it on someone, and that'll give us a tip as to who may have committed the robbery, I would think.
Chloe, do not put that snake choker on, even if you were part of the robbery. Okay. So there's the snake choker, and then of course there is the snake that literally bites her inside this episode. Something that Amy Lou Wood said in an interview, she was like, basically Chelsea's the kind of person who goes through life and sees snakes and just embrace them without any care of the worry of the danger that they might present. She's just like, oh, you're a snake, I want to hug you. Never mind your poisonous fangs.
Chelsea, you cannot fix that cobra. You cannot fix him.
But can she fix Rick? Can Amarita fix Rick? What are we gonna do?
No, please. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No. Go ahead.
I do wonder this about Rick, though, because you're right about the metaphor, which is very clear on the surface. Him in the cage, the snake's in the cage, him feeling restrained in that way. But as he's kind of talking it out with Chelsea, there's a lot of discussion about snakes being inherently evil, right? And you get this bit from Rick about, well, even evil things shouldn't be treated like shit because it only makes them more evil. And as a reflection of people treating him a certain way because of what he admits are the bad things that he's done, we don't really know what those are yet.
Yeah.
Understandable. Mm-hmm. Putting it in context and understanding his worldview as it applies to whatever he's after with Hollinger is a little bit more complicated because we have every indication, Joe, that you were correct, that Rick is trying to get some kind of revenge. It's
satisfaction.
Some kind of satisfaction, as he says. A lot of signs pointing directly to the idea that Hollinger probably murdered his father or was involved in some way, and he's looking for satisfaction. But in that case, is Hollinger not also a snake? Is he not also someone who is not inherently evil and shouldn't be met with purely evil in response?
It really strikes me as satisfaction, by the way, as a lot of people pointed out, is iconic dual language, I demand satisfaction, I demand a duel.
I thought you meant dual language, but you mean dual language.
Like pistols at dawn.
Yes.
Duel.
I thought you were talking about the other kinds of satisfaction that Chelsea is hooking him up with.
Oh, there you go. Also true. But I think that Rick, I just really fundamentally feel like Rick is someone who is at a crossroads. And on one branch of the road is Chelsea, and on the other branch of the road is Jim Hollinger, Bangkok, Satisfaction. And one is a good choice and one is a bad choice. And I genuinely don't know, based on previous seasons of White Lotus, what choice Rick is going to make.
Right.
I'm rooting for him to take the Chelsea branch of the road. But I've rooted for so many characters in White Lotus and they have disappointed me.
You can't do it.
I don't know.
This is not the show for it. The bit of foreshadowing I am most concerned with at this point is not a dead body, is not Chelsea almost dying several times in this episode. It's her holding up a tank that says, "You break it, you buy it," with a broken heart on it, and saying, "Should I buy this?" It just does not seem like things are going to go well for her at the end of the day. And I hope Rick, Snake or not, make some kind of choice that makes sense for both of them. I don't know.
I'm very worried about everyone, and that's exactly where we should be. Episode 3 of White Lotus. Okay, to wrap up, we got this fun prompt from our listener, Sean, which may or may not be tangentially related to an upcoming episode of The Rewatchables, who can say, but Sean says, between Jennifer Coolidge and Parker Posey, it seems like Mike White really excels at dipping into the Christopher Guest mockumentary talent pool. Which two Christopher Guest stars would you like to see in season 4? One hotel staff and one guest. And just for people who are listening, in case you don't know the great filmmaker Christopher Guest, he made things like Waiting for Guffman, A Mighty Wind, Best in Show,
This is Spinal
Did
Tap.
Not Make Spinal Tap, and For Your Consideration and Mascots, a couple other things. So and he has a stable of actors that he likes to use.
Oh, yeah.
Jennifer Coolidge being a repeat offender, Parker Posey as well.
Yeah.
Parker Posey in Waiting for Guffman is one of my favorite things I've ever seen.
She would have pre-White Lotus if you told me and you gave me this prompt and you told me the general construction of the show. Parker Posey would be my first round pick. So dreams really do come true.
They do. Jennifer Coolidge, sneaky star, obviously.
Oh.
Tanya being crucial to all 3 seasons of White Lotus. Double Emmy Award winner Jennifer Coolidge. So Rob Mahoney,
Yeah,
of the classic Christopher Guest stable, who are you picking to check in at the White Lotus, and who are you picking to work at the White Lotus?
I'm gonna say we might have to step out of time a little bit, just because some of the cast of these movies are getting quite up there, and so it would limit them to basically being like elderly grandparental figures popping into these stories, which would also be fine, and I would be open to.
Yeah,
to me, the guest, I would love Fred Willard on this show as sort of like an like ecstatic, overly friendly, in everyone's business kind of guest, in a way that I feel like we don't get often enough, right? We have a lot of rich people who kind of want to be in their little pods, and not enough of them who want aggressively to be friends with everyone. And I would love him in a context like this.
Except for Kate, who was like, remember we were at that.
But she doesn't even want to be friends. She just wants to make the social connection and get the capital and then go back to her table.
Don't you remember me? I talk about beans a lot. Is that not interesting to you?
Can you imagine the bean talk at that baby shower? Oh, it was off the charts.
She's talking about heritage beans. She has a lot to say. Okay. So you've got Fred Willard as a guest.
Yep.
Who do you have working at the White Lotus?
Our old friend and recent friend, Joe, Bob Balaban, feels like he would be great to work the staff at the White Lotus.
I almost picked Bob Balaban, but I was really hoping you would pick Bob Balaban.
How can you not? Like he reads as neurotic and exacting so easily that the idea of a bunch of rich, privileged guests winding him up is not a stretch of the imagination.
I have chosen for my guest Michael McKean.
Yes.
Of Better Call Saul and other fame, obviously. I just think he would do a really good job as like a disgruntled guest at the White Lotus. He's
often quite disgruntled, honestly.
Yeah, patriarch of the family, comically disgruntled.
Yes.
Giving real Chuck vibes from Better Call Saul. And then John Michael Higgins as a hotel manager.
Hell yeah.
I love John Michael Higgins. I think he's a really stealth, like lethal performer in these Christopher Guest movies, and also has done a lot of great voice acting work. You might know him from Legends of Korra, among other things. And I just think as like a hotel manager who is like so good at putting on the like smarmy front while actively hating you, I think he would be absolutely killer at that. So Neither of us went for Eugene Levy or Catherine O'Hara. A couple obvious picks, Jane Lynch, anything like that. You know?
I feel like Eugene Levy and Catherine O'Hara have already done like crass rich person pretty recently, and so I'm good.
Hotel management quite recently.
Very true. Like we've seen it, admittedly in a slightly different flavor, but let's branch it out a little bit.
I agree. Okay, if you have any thoughts about Christopher Guest regular who should show up in White Lotus, I'd love to hear it.
Please.
monkeysshootout@gmail.com or prestigetv@spotify.com. Anything else you want to say about this episode or White Lotus in general before we go, Rob Mahoney?
I had just had a bit of a feeling with Chloe, who's played by Charlotte Le Bon, as far as like she was registering in my brain as very familiar, and I couldn't put a finger on why. And in this episode, it finally kind of clicked for me that she has such a Winona Ryder thing going on. Just like a kind of a resemblance in a way. Very, very different energies, very different kind of places in terms of like, this is not a Winona part, but there's some kind of similarity there that's grabbing me.
She's been reminding me of Kristen Ritter a lot.
Oh, yes.
Not energy-wise, but looks-wise for sure.
What do we think of her and of Chloe and Saxon? We didn't really remark upon their budding friendship.
I hear you're a douche. Isn't that what she says
I
to
hear
him?
you're a douche. But she's into it, you know?
Is she into it or is he a mark? I can't tell.
She's
or
into
both.
something. She's into the idea of it.
Yeah. He definitely looks wealthy, and that is something that she seems interested in. So love that for her. I don't know. Are you rooting for those two crazy kids, Chloe and Saxon?
I cannot bring myself to root for them, but I will be watching with great curiosity where their relationship goes.
Great. Okay. So that does it for season 3, episode 3 of The White Lotus. Rob and I will be back at the end of the week to talk more Severance. Exciting. We should note that Bill and Mal and I are also covering White Lotus immediately after the episode ends on Sunday nights. You can watch all of this stuff.
One note on that. You guys mentioned on the last Sunday pod, vis-a-vis Gaitok. You know, I take this with great consideration. I've thought about it. I've talked to my agents. I will not be hosting the Creep Radar podcast, despite the fact that it was so graciously offered to me. So
you haven't seen the art we've created for it yet.
I have not, but also who simply has the time? You know, there are so many creeps. There are only so many hours in the day. I could not be bothered.
You are but one, Rob.
Seriously.
It's true. Okay. Well, we'll let Bill know that's your formal a polite pass.
Yes, let him down gently, please.
Okay, so you can watch all of those, including Rob's new show. What is it? Creep Detector?
Creep Radar.
Creep Radar.
All because I am empirically increasingly right about Gaitok. That should qualify me for the job, but I don't want it.
On the Ringer TV channel on YouTube or in Spotify. You know, you just open the thing and there it's us talking.
Yep.
So that is what is going on. Also, we hear you. We will be back to the pit. We cannot tell you exactly when, but we will be back. And thank you to Donnie Beacham for this episode, to John Richter, who was like literally breaking his back to put out all this video content for you guys, and to CTA for being the best and helping out this morning, and Justin Sayles.
Always.
The guy. We will see you soon. Bye.